So okay, this is my first video and it will be about 34, 37 something things that went wrong with the channel and why I'm wearing a headphone while recording a simple discussion video or a simple statement video that I'm trying to make on the channel. I wrote the video a few days ago. I'll try to look into the camera then trying to read the script because I'm recording it through my phone and my PC is right here, 45 or 90 degrees angle between the two. So I'll try to read less from the script and try to just briefly take a glance at the main heading and just try to improvise off that. So as warm up, I will give somewhat of a picture of what a setup looks like to record this type of video, because I think you can go quite far into this audio production and stuff without having a lot of equipment. So what I'm doing right now is that my phone is probably very hot at the moment. I will not touch it. I'm charging it right now. It was like 6 or 7% and it wouldn't let me record. So I've tucked that up in a bookshelf. So I had to pull one of my books out of the bookshelf to place it there. So the system requirements that you need start with basic audio stuff, is like recording stuff like this, videos where you talk to a camera, or things like music production and basic music production, instrumentals and all. I think you can get by at a equivalent of a like 3 or 4 gens, or even, and if you are low on money, even older generations of Intel or AMD x86-64 processor, and at the very minimum at least I would say 4 gigs of RAM and 250 gigs of storage. Yeah, I think a laptop with around that specs will definitely get you started on stuff, and that's how I started as well. So I will take a quick break and check how the audio has been this far into the video. Yeah, so the audio seems to be getting on fine, and now I will feel somewhat comfortable removing my headphones and getting into the video. By the way, the only product that I think you need to spend your money on without thinking too much about it is your headphones. This is like refurbished. I did this padding myself. These are Sony MDR7506. Every studio uses in their images and whatnot. And I think you can get started on these or anything that is not like very consumer base heavy stuff, or very cheap, like things you find at an airport or for free in any public transport that you take. That will do you quite well to begin with. I will take another pause here and get on with the video. Okay, so the title that I wrote, it should be on screen somewhere. 100, 37 or 34 things that went wrong with the channel. The first thing is obviously like a bonus thing that went wrong was these, like, do you see these books in the frame? I think they do look alright, and I'm not really bothered about it. I can put stuff right over here if I wanted to, or right down here if I wanted to. Like, that is something that is really convenient. So the first thing was being a borderline insomniac. I do not sleep well. Is that a surprise? I don't know. Maybe you can look into my eyes and you can see, I don't know. The second one is victimization of the self. Pretty obvious. Now I will try to move on as quick as possible from the very blatant points and get on with the video, as I don't want this to be a like 17-minute video or something. The third one is again connected to the first one, which is having irregular sleep cycles. I had a phase in 2024 where I would be kept up for like 24 hours and then sleep like 23 hours or like 19 hours for like several months. The fourth one is spontaneity and procrastination. So I heard David Lynch in a video say that, but an idea that is lost to time or lost to like memory, like you trust memory too much sometimes, that is something that evokes the feeling of suicide in an artist. I'm very loosely quoting him right here. So spontaneity is like the birth of ideas. Like most artists, I think, are very spontaneous with how they come up with ideas. They just naturally come to you when you go through life and live. And procrastination is like actually trying to translate it into something that is material, like a song or a writing or a poem, something like that, which or a book. I have that is actually so that is like obviously trying to create a material thing out of something that is not material. It seems very dissonant and a very treacherous thing to go through. And I have been trying to write a book, and I have tried several times, at least 3 or 4 times, to actually make a coherent book. But my ideas shift so drastically, like 1/10 into the book, that I just drop it and scrape it. So the fifth one is again connected to the last one, which is depending too much on the idea that my memory is reliable, like believing that my memory is too like reliable, and which is obviously which it is not something that you can rely on. Bad things happen if you do rely on it too much. You lose a lot of ideas, and then you start thinking in a very mystical, like almost a religious sense. Like you start to create a lore out of it. Maybe I wouldn't have done justice to an idea. So, like some people do, definitely not. The sixth one is related to the age of this channel, which has been around 6 years. I think the anniversary comes on the 23rd of April or May. So you go through a lot of changes in your creative direction. When I started out, the only interest that I had was in things like drumming, and like the reason I started making projects in FL Studio was because I didn't have a drum kit at home and I really wanted to learn the drums. And then it just propelled from that. Like now I should make a song because I heard a song that I really liked and I want to do something like that. So, because FL Studio is a really easy software to get into, and you like learn quite a lot quite easily. So creative directions change, and obviously there's some friction that comes with it. And I'm realizing this will be a video essay. And for the seventh, we have the inability to commit to the emergent creative direction. It is again linked to the sixth one. This is basically me pointing out the resistance that comes with trying to chase an idea and bring it to the material world from something that lives in your head. The eighth one is school and schoolwork. School obviously is a hindrance, completely stripping out its merits for a moment for this argument. School, as an investment of time, is really a determinant to how much hours you can put into like creative stuff and music and anything else really. School is a really isolated environment, and you get quite a superficial idea of the world through it, I think. The ninth one is going through things that people go through in coming of age. The 10th one is the coming of age. Yeah. I thought this would be a very slapstick and a humorous section in the video, but yeah, it is lacking any emotion at the moment. Just silence. Maybe silence can describe this feeling more than words can. One of the rare moments that the statement is actually true, or it is just my complacency. The 11th one is the inability to adapt when care falls short. So it ties back to the idea of not being very resourceful when you start out as a musician or someone who wants to create videos on the internet or video essays or just put your thoughts out on the internet. Being resourceful is something that will very much give you head start in these things, and because I didn't have such a head start, I did change my creative directions quite a lot of times, or my creative choices quite a lot of times, because I didn't have the appropriate equipment that I wanted to use. Yeah, I do not like look back upon any moment in my creative time on this channel and think that it would have been better if I used a better like MIDI keyboard or a better PC or like a licensed version of FL Studio or a paid plugin. To just recap the 11th one, it is the resistance that you face from your resources when you're not particularly resourceful and can buy things like a MIDI keyboard on day one, right? I think that is not the right way to look at it. The right way is like you really need to make the most out of the things that you have. And I think that is really hard until you are very passionate about a thing or an idea or some other form of some other adjective or noun or something. The 12th one is getting into writing. So I got into writing. I wrote one of my first pieces in 2023, I think, or 2022. Yeah, I wrote quite a lot on and off throughout 2022, 3 and 2 and 3. And around 2024, I think, was the year that I wrote the most. That has certainly taken a lot of time that I would invest otherwise into making music. The 14th one is having every social media account and computer getting compromised because I used a pirated copy of FL Studio. So this was in 2024, and my projects had gotten so complex that I really did need to save a project to work on it the next day, because anything that is made before the Concubine album is made within a day or within one session that I usually had overnight or like late at nights or in midnight, and I would commit 3 to 4 hours or sometimes at most 6 or 7 hours or 8 hours to a project. Like I would leave my computer on for or half a day and click the MIDI into the piano roll and just create my beats. It was simple then, but I had to pirate it at the time that I was making Concubine because I wanted to do a lot of stuff with basically the orchestration and the stuff really took a lot of time. So yeah, I pirated several copies of FL Studio and used them throughout the Concubine and What Remains of the Hidden album, and I released the two of them successfully. But what happened right around May 8th or 13th was that my accounts got hacked. I checked my Instagram and my profile picture was changed. So I felt suspicious, and when I looked into it, my Google account had been compromised. My Steam, my Instagram, my Twitter, my Facebook account that I don't use, my OneDrive, even my Ubisoft account, everything had been compromised. I didn't lose anything. I think I didn't lose anything. 19 rupees that I had stored in my Steam wallet. You cannot buy anything with 19 rupees on Steam, so I guess that was a lesson learned with not a lot of sacrifice. So I have also made like sub points as A, B, and C in some of the points, and 14A says this basically explains the 14th point is this put me off making music or doing any other creative work for a good 2 months. So yeah, that is true. When when every account of yours gets hacked along with the PC, you start to really suspect everything for a good while and really start to stem away from piracy and pirating games and software online. And I had to reinstall Windows, and we will come to the topic of changing DAWs after the fact that we will discuss more about changing DAWs and how that experience was in points that would come later into the video. So the 15th point is about that trying out Cardinal, Synth, and Reaper. So Reaper is basically a DAW which is very similar to something like Cubase. It is a different workflow from FL Studio. FL Studio is a very unique workflow in itself. Reaper focuses more on recording your instruments rather than using the piano roll, because piano roll in Reaper is horrendous. So I tried Reaper for a good 3 to 4 months or even 6 or 8 months, I don't quite remember. I used it on the side with FL Studio. I would make my projects sometimes in FL Studio and master them in Reaper, or make them in Reaper, then put FL Studio effects in it after rendering the stems in Reaper, and then bouncing it back into Reaper to master it, because I really liked the Reaper's workflow to master audio. But besides that, I think it is a DAW that is really hard to get into. It feels very geeky and nerdy, and I don't really need any more obstructions while I create music. And Cardinal is a modular synth program, which is, I think it is a fork of VCV Rack, which is a paid program, but Cardinal is free and open source, and it is not really a DAW, but something that you can create interesting patches in using modular synth. If you have seen people with I will put it here. If you can see it, if you have seen people with like walls of like things that look like super alien machines or something, like super high tech, something that the government is hiding from you in area 69 or something. So they will have like a wall of hardware with like knobs and lights all over it, and several wires hanging loose from those blocks. So that is basically something that Cardinal tried to implement into a software form, and I think it is a really really fun experience when you try to learn it, and you start to see how far sound design can go with just the basic for sine, saw, triangle, and square waves. So 15A says I had a fixed workflow with FL Studio and VST plugins. Trying other softwares, be it in integrating like Cardinal into my FL Studio workflow, or switching to Reaper entirely for months that followed after the breach. I lost a lot of time on that. The 16th one is forgoing the DAW workflow entirely and switching to an improvisation style that I uploaded on Instagram. So this was also around the time that I wrote most of my writing in, and I was really getting away from FL Studio because I had to prepare for some entrances. So this was after I was done with most of my tracks in What Remains of the Hidden. I just had to release the album, so I was not quite worried about it. It was all right waiting after the fact that exams happened, that I got onto the project of like finally making the music videos and compiling the album and remastering it and then releasing it on platforms like YouTube. And so anyway, during the months that preceded the exam, I basically started to improvise on the piano a lot on my Casio CTS 100, which is something that I bought right around the time that the channel started. It was not meant for the channel, but I really wanted to learn the piano, so yeah. I also really wanted MIDI in that, and I did get MIDI from that piano for a while, but then it just didn't cut it. I think I spilled water on it or something. So what I would do is just I would put my phone in like one of the places, maybe even right on the keyboard, and just angle it enough that like at least 2 octaves of the piano were visible and people could see my hands like pressing down the keys. So that was all I wanted, and somewhat decent audio, which I would put reverb on or something, and then just upload it onto Instagram. I still do that, but I've streamlined my workflow in that regard, like in quite a lot of ways. So the 17th one says getting a full version of FL Studio this year. Uploads have since become, at the very least, somewhat consistent. Very blatant. The next point. 18th. Going through the games catalog that I always wanted to play as a kid but never got the chance to. Again, very blatant. I will name some games that I really like: GTA 4, State of Decay 1, Firewatch, Mind Test or Luanti. I used to play a lot of that as a kid. Uh, Cradle, and I think these are 5. And I will just fill this page with games that I really like. The 19th one is committing to ideas that are stuck in the past. So 19A talks about the what remains of the hidden, and again something that I think I have talked about previously in this recording. So 19A talks about what remains of the hidden, which I started again in 2024 in the summer months, or the what we call as hard or son in this region of India. And my vision with what remains of the hidden was, the first thing was that I didn't really put a name onto the album like 6 months into creating it. And the other interesting thing is that the first track, as The Children of Candle, was actually second in chronological order. I made the second track first, and then the first track emerged out of an idea that I came across while improvising, and that track also appears on a later track, which is called Through the Forest Trail or something like that. So this album took a major shift when I took a trip to Meghalaya, a beautiful state in India, and then that's when the title came through. I think after I returned from the trip, and I dedicated the album to experiences that I had in the trip, and trying to forge some magic into the music that I felt there. The 20th says is I'll try to do handstand, which is I'm not going to do it because first of all there's a fan literally like over my head. Like I don't have the room for doing a handstand right now. I thought this would be funny, but it is not. The 21st one is I wrote it like quite a. The 21st one is I fell in the bathroom today. 22nd says not having a very optimistic outlook on life. I will combine some points A and B into like a single thing and just try to explain the 22nd point, which is not feeling very optimistic. So the first thing is that I didn't move out when I wanted to. It has been a few years since that, and I do realize that moving out is a idea that is very much inherited from Western media, and you don't have the same amounts, the same level of like opportunities to like really work towards that goal or dream, and it requires a lot of effort that I don't think I would be very happy to put into a thing and then still be uncertain about it. It is not something that I think is worth pursuing, at least for me. I often made a very big statement about my music is that I solely do it for the love of the game, the love of the game, and I don't think that sits with my subconscious very well because I do want recognition. I do hope to see my music be featured in things like films or like even YouTube videos, which it has been featured in, but not in the level that I wanted to, and have like a cult following on things like Bandcamp, and for me to have weekly or even monthly visitors on my website that go through my writing pages and like really resonate with it. I don't think I want the sole condition of being a recognized artist because I think that breeds complacency. I think I also want to put some value into the listeners or the audience's life as a whole. So this is a really interesting thing that I wrote. The comments are few and far in between the videos. That's all I have to latch onto in terms of validation. I am trying to get away from it. 23rd is making a website. 24th is learning HTML and CSS. 25th is making other videos that I deleted out of reluctance. I'm not quite sure what this refers to. Maybe it refers to videos that I made in the very early stages of my channel, like 5 or 6 years ago. But I don't really look back on them and like regret them. I'm very much happy to have made them. 26 is publishing videos that I kept unlisted for years. I recently published a lot of videos from like 2023, 3 and 2 and 4 and so on that I had previously kept unlisted on YouTube because those were the personal videos that I upload on the channel and posted them solely to like share with people. But I think most of the ones that were relevant to the channel in any capacity, I have made them public. So the 27th is consuming media on YouTube and whatnot to the point that I felt my conscience shrink and committing to the act for an absurd amount of time for one reason or the other. So this talks about like the state that you are in after you have consumed like 16 YouTube videos that are like 20 minutes long, 16 essays that you have heard on YouTube, and I think your brain experiences something. Your brain feels very defeated after a while of doing this routinely. A particular experience that I remember or that I have often is like if I try to be silent for like 2 minutes, I wouldn't be able to be. Some thought or some like a thought equivalent of like a like what is that, a sound worm or something that is a really addictive melody. So things would just I would just my mind would imagine and repeat things that I have picked up from like living a life and from living and watching things on YouTube. And when I am distracted, I do feel very guilty. And when I'm in the process of consumption, I do feel very guilty because I know that I'm not putting my time in the best of things. 28 is waiting for gear to come to make music. Again, I didn't have this mic like until a year ago, or the interface, or even like these headphones. I didn't have them like 2 or 3 years into the channel, and like more than 5 years into making music. I think this is a decent pair if you want to, like, if you have some experience making music, and you can find a balance between visual mixing and auditory mixing, which is like listening through these and then also checking like the limiters, and then checking the compression, like how much you can hear the compression and the attack and the release of the compression, and maybe EQ as well. I do this a lot with EQ. I always double check my like frequency uh, graph in a parametric EQ before I bounce a track on into wave or flag. So waiting for gear rarely does good for an artist, unless, and I think you at the very least or should try to create something in the meanwhile before the product arrives or before you can afford it. So 29 talks about losing the ability that I had as a kid to like make 3 songs in a day, or like or publish a video every 3 days, and like losing that voice as I have grown older. And this is a very recent thing that has happened to me. Like up until the concubine, I was fairly consistent with whatever I created. I would create music on a very regular basis. I didn't play a lot of games, even when I had a computer that could play games like decently well, or those that I wanted to play. I mostly invested my time in music. After what remains of the hidden, this period, the part-timer era, the years that I will be putting into the part-timer would go down as the slowest ones in my artistic career up to this point. Okay, we are hoping that my PC and my like phone cooperates for the next 10 points. 30th is hitting a wall with what I could do as an untrained pianist. So after around 2022, I was competent enough in at least music theory and playing the piano, that, or like creating music in a full studio, that I could make beats half decently. And I was exploring that that time in the journey of an artist, where you like have a lot of time and have developed a new skill, and you can implement it because you have a lot of time, or you are really driven towards an idea. So I have hit a wall with like what I can do with my skills as a pianist. My like I keep maybe there's a problem. The problem might be that I want to reinvent with every progression that I write, or even questioning the idea of, or the culture of having chords as a basis of your song, or the 12 tone equal temperament, although the equal temperament drifting from that makes things quite a bit trippy. Tend not to go into that. So yeah, in the part-timer album, I am just, the first thing is that I'm trying not to use the piano as much. I'm mostly trying to make a more of a guitar based album. I'm not scared to like get inspired from an idea and implement that into a song, like a riff that I like a semi-related version of it, or like somewhat like a similar version of it, and implement it into my song. I think that there's a thin line between plagiarism and inspiration, as everyone says, and I think I'm treading on the line, and I'm more towards the side of inspiration at the moment. The 30, the 31st one is graduating from school, leaving the school band, yeah, which took me away from making music in a way. So the school band was my introduction to like drums, which like snowballed into FL Studio and arranging that I do now. When I graduated from school, I think, and getting away from those people and the routinely schedules that you have to attend as a member of the school band, and having that as your identity for a while in the school, and people remembering you as the kid that played drums for a good 3 years in high school, and losing that suddenly, and people don't know you in college and things you have done. Or I think it does a lot for anyone that for anyone. The 32nd one is the university music club being the worst nightmare I could imagine. So the university music club that I was welcomed into was something that I fundamentally stood against, which was like I don't think this is as bad of a thing in Western countries, or like I cannot comment on that, but in India specifically, or in this college, the music club was very deeply associated with religious stuff and hymns and prayers and that stuff, and trying to be missionaries and push us or the first years students or into religious stuff, and like trying to preach, like devote this much of your time like praying to God or something like that, or you should wake up at 4 a.m. and like there's a practice called riyaz, and do riyaz, which is for singers, and do riyaz in this scale at 4 a.m. in the morning, and like trying to open your mouth fully and like really disturbing everyone at 4 a.m. and things like that. And I didn't really jive with that very well, and maybe that wasn't even as big of a problem that I've made it out to be. The main problem was the band that I got selected in was a cover band. The band that I auditioned to get into, the college band, for which like around 2,500 students applied, and I somehow got in. The band was mostly a cover band. Now my school band was also a cover band, but coming to college, I expected like people to be a bit more experienced in music and stuff, and wanting to create their own songs, but that is very rare in where I live. The 33 basically talks about getting shortlisted to be in the college band, and when I was sick of them, I tried to convince them to like kick me out of the band, but they wouldn't because they really wanted a drummer, and drummers is a very scarce thing where I live, I think, or at least that's what they told me. And I don't see a whole lot of skilled drummers of my age in this area, and I'm not particularly skilled. I'm basically untrained, and I have trained by myself and listening to like rock songs and things like that, to a lot of city pop and indie Japanese indie rock, and trying to like implement that into my music and also in my playing as a drummer, into my skill as a drummer or my influences as a drummer. Again, the crux of it is that I really didn't want to be in that band, and it was really hard getting out. But I did get out, and yeah, some things should be left for the second video if I ever make one. I will not like make a statement or a promise here. The 34th, okay, so about the number 34 I've written. I was making a sum to put as a suffix in an email address, and instead of the correct number 37, I got 34, and I realized that after 4 months, and the number has since stuck. So okay, that was blatant. 35th, dropping out of college and commotion that comes with it. In a very brief way, I would describe like the reason I left college was jive with the course quite as well, and I really wanted to do something in the philosophy and literature sort of thing, which is I don't think is as valued as some of the other things that you can pick. But still, I want to do that, and I'll be enrolling in that maybe this year or next one, depends. The 36th one, the second last one, realizing the humiliation ritual. 36A. It's so multifaceted, but how people respond to you for just existing lays the groundwork for the person that you will be. Latent. 36B. I was very susceptible at a time in my life, discovering nature as a teenager instead of the mystical, almost comedic descriptions of Diogenes or anything in that era. I have overcome the Nietzschean influence since then. It's not a time that I fondly look back on. So the last one, 37th. Me.